a sink is properly cleaned up, it will all be drawn with lines and arcs to an accurate size on the same layer and joined with no breaks. Then it can be saved into a library with a common insertion point. We'll be following a sink editing procedure that can be found in your Park Industries training manual or on the Park Industries website. The first thing we'll need is a DXF file, usually called a cutout template. Some of the sink manufacturers may provide these for us. Go to the manufacturer's website to find out. Open your internet browser and search for the sink manufacturer. There may be multiple choices. I'll usually look and read and make sure I go to the manufacturer itself. Then you can either scroll through or search to find the model number that you're looking for. You can usually click on the image to get more specifications. And we'll have to search through the information to find the DXF of the cutout template that we're looking for. Here in the specification section, I do see DXFs. However, they're 3D DXFs, which I can't use. But here under installation, I find the cutout template, which is a DXF. And when I click on it, it downloads into my download folder, which I can view by clicking on the folder icon. And then I'll either save as or drag this file into a location to save all my sinks. So I'll click and hold down on this DXF file and drag and drop it into the sink editing folder that I have created. And if I click on the folder, I can see its contents, and one of the files is the DXF. You can also use this drag and drop method to open this file in AlphaCam by clicking on the file, dragging and dropping into the AlphaCam drawing area. This will also open up the Input CAD window as instructed on step number 2 of our procedure. You will want most of the settings selected as I'm showing, and if you have clear memory selected, it's the same as opening up a new drawing, which was step number 1 of our procedure. Let's repeat this process, getting to the same place, following the procedure instead. Step number 1 was go to the File tab and select New. Step number 2 was to select Input CAD from the Home tab. And here we'll see the same Input CAD window as we did before. We'll choose the same selections and then click OK. And then we'll browse to find the DXF of our sink cutout template. I saved mine in a sink editing folder. I'll select it and then press the Open button to open it. And here we can see we got to the same place as we did before with the drag and drop method. And now with the drawing open, we'll move on to step number 3, which is to use the Keep function. I'll go to the Edit tab and select Keep. We only want to keep what we intend on cutting. So I'll select the outline of the sink. Since it's joined, I can select it all with one click. And if I wanted to save the faucet holes, I'd select them at this time as well. And in this case, I'm only choosing to keep one geometry and delete all the rest. And now that we have just the outline of our sink, we'll look into how it was made, with either lines and arcs or splines. So we'll follow step 4 and explode the sink to see. This sink is already joined or connected, so I could pick it, but to be safe, I'm going to pull a window around it so I know that everything is exploded. And what I'm looking for is how many white X's or breaks are along the perimeter of my sink. This X can represent the end of a line or the beginning of the arc, and then this X is the end of that arc, and so on. This is how I tell that this was drawn with lines and arcs and not splines. If you don't see any X's, make sure Show Brakes is turned on. If there were splines in your drawing, they would be shown as white X's that appear to be stacked on top of each other. Splines are basically very short line segments in the shape of an arc. For this example, I'm going to use a simple sink with just lines and arcs instead. And now we can change them onto the green layer geometry. We can use the change from the edit or the one on the Park Industries toolbar. And we want to change from old layer to geometry. Then we'll click OK, and we'll window to select all lines and arcs before we finish. The layer geometry is green. Step number 6 is to use common line removal. Here again, I'll window to select all the pieces of geometry, and then finish, and then I'll say yes to join all the segments together. And when everything is properly joined, there should only be one X. And I do only see one X, but I'm going to zoom in on it and keep on zooming in until the X goes away. If there aren't any overlaps or gaps, then this is properly closed. Step 7 is only if needed, if we had splines. When we viewed this, the X's showed us that we had lines and arcs. So we'll skip step 7. We'll want to measure our sink to make sure it's the same size as what's in the box. The easiest way to do this is first enclose it with a rectangle. We can choose enclosing rectangle from the Park Industries toolbar, then select our sink and follow through with the finish. Now we can get our outermost measurements of the sink by measuring the enclosing rectangle, which we'll do with distance and angle. It's best to select the bottom left corner endpoint of and the top right corner endpoint of for your measurements. This will give us that actual distance between the two corners and also the distance in the X and the distance in the Y, which would give us the overall sink size, which we assume is in inches, or the numbers would have much larger values. And if it was drawn in millimeters, we would scale it to the inch equivalent. Step number 11 is to offset. We can offset in for an overhang or offset out for a reveal. I'm going to choose not to offset my saved sink, but I'll offset upon inserting it into a countertop if needed. And step number 12 is to move to a common insertion point. When I insert this sink onto a countertop, I use the middle of the bottom edge as its reference. So I want to save that point as 0, 0 in my drawing. So I'll choose Move, and then I'll select both the sink and the enclosing rectangle before I finish. For a base point, I'm going to use the middle of the bottom edge of the enclosing rectangle, which I can select by picking here. And I want this point to become x0 and y0. And we can see or verify that that point has moved to that location. And step 13 is optional. You can leave the enclosing rectangle on when you save it, or you can delete it. I'm going to delete mine since I can add it later if I need it anyway. And now that we've successfully cleaned up our sink drawing, we can save it to be used over and over again, which is the last step in our procedure, step 14, which says go to the File tab and choose Save As, specify a location, and then type in a name of the sink. It may be beneficial to use a name that you commonly refer to it as in your shop. And that completes this sink cleanup. It is now ready to be inserted into countertops as needed. So we completed this procedure with the exception of converting splines to lines and arcs and scaling from millimeters to inches. I will be covering converting splines to lines and arcs and scaling in Sync Editing Part 2. In Part 2, I will use a much faster pace and follow the Sync Editing Fast Track checklist. Thank you for choosing Park Industries.